Let me just, we need to talk before we jump in this morning to everyone here that was born before 1990. So to get a good handle on the title of our message as well as what this means, if you were born before 1990, you need to listen. I'm going to give you a little culture, there's a word for it, but I can't think of what it is, but a little pseudo-type culture lesson in text messaging. So some brilliant person back in the day invented a conversation way through the phone where you don't have to talk, you can just text. And so that's been a way of communication for years and years. So if you're born before 1990, you spent most of your life where if you wanted to talk to someone, you had to call them on the telephone. If you were born way before 1990, then you spent some of your life where you had to actually talk to them face to face if you wanted to talk. And so that was hard to do. Some of you, even before that, you didn't have a language yet, and you kind of grunted. I remember Wes telling me you just had to grunt to each other, and so then language came about. Text messaging is interesting because you can't read the voice inflection when people text, and that becomes incredibly important. So they came up with these things called emojis. And emojis kind of help tell the attitude with which you're saying something. Now, if you're not, one thing that's great that's happened with text messaging is even the older generation has become pros at it, because if you want to communicate with your kid or your grandkid, or in some cases your great-grandkid, you need to learn how to text. And people would say, when this whole thing came out, well, if they want to talk to me, they'll just call me. Well, no, they won't. And so then you end up not talking to them, and you figure, well, that's not going to work. So you learn how to text. And there are some things that you should know about texting. I'm going to show you just a couple, and one as it relates to our message today. But I'm going to read you a text message that I received from our youth pastor. And this is all that the text message said. And then I'm going to show you the different ways that voice inflection can change the message of a text. And it's important to know in which way he meant it. So just a little while ago, I get a text message from Nate Lohmuller, our student pastor, and it said, the text said these words, just a few words. It said, "I didn't say we should kill him," was all that the text message said. Thing that Nate and I had going on. And so anyway, you don't need to know the backstory. But as I'm reading that, without emojis, there's several different ways that could have been read. It could have been read, depending on where you put the inflection on the word, it could have been read, "I didn't say we should kill him," meaning someone else said it, right? Or he could have meant it, "I didn't say we should kill him." Or he could have meant, "I didn't say we should kill him," like maybe he insinuated something else. Or he could have meant, "I didn't say we should kill him." Right? You see how the total meaning changes? The last three are my favorite. "I didn't say we should kill him." Or, this is a good one, "I didn't say we should kill him." Or it even gets better, "I didn't say we should kill him." Right? Like maybe it was someone else. So you have no idea what the text message says, depending on where the voice inflection goes. Here's the other thing that I learned just recently that is a problem with text messaging, and if you were born before 1990, you need to know this so that you're not rude. There's something called leaving someone on red. So it's normal these days to have read receipts turned on. And if you're in my generation, it came out with emails. You could tell if a person read it, and then everyone turned those off real quick because I don't want you to know when I read it, especially if I can't get to it. Well, now in this generation, they all have them on. And Josh left school one day. He texted me and he said, "Hey, I'm leaving school. I'll be home in just a little bit." And so I read it, and then it said read. And so on his phone, he sees his message, and then it says right below it, it says read, which means that I had read the message. And then I didn't respond. I finally get home that evening. He's like, "Dude, you left me on read." And I'm like, okay. Well, evidently that's rude. If someone texts you, you're supposed to respond. So there's this thing that says you're not supposed to leave someone on red. That's a bad thing. So if you're born prior to 1990, don't do that. It's rude. There's your little social lesson for today. If you're born after 1990, you're kind of like, yeah, duh. I mean, don't leave someone on red. That's the worst thing you should do. Well, here's the question. What happens when God does that? What happens when you're in a part of your life where you've prayed about something over and over again, but for whatever reason, it seems like God has left you on red, that he hasn't answered your prayer. He hasn't done anything. He hasn't shown up. And then to make matters worse, you've seen him answer prayers in someone else's life, and they got through this just fine, but for whatever reason, he's not answering it in your life. This can be, for most people, a train wreck in your faith. For some, it marks the beginning of the end of your faith, to where your thought is, I'm out. I don't want any part of that. It's as though God doesn't care, right? Because our conversation then goes, well, I prayed about this and God didn't answer, so maybe God doesn't care. And then the next step after that is there really even a God? What if this is all made up? What if this is fake? What if he doesn't really exist? And then you're out. And religion was just one of those things I tried. I did that. I had a relationship, or I had religion, maybe not a relationship, and it didn't work for me because nothing changed in my life. Well, today, in our sign, so we're talking about the 7 signs that the gospel writer John was an eyewitness to. That's the title of the series. John saw Jesus do many things, and he wrote them down. He didn't call them miracles, he called them signs. The reason he called them signs is because it pointed to something. It pointed to something that Jesus did, and if we believe that, then John says you'll have life in his name. So the other Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, those are called synoptic Gospels, which means they're kind of written in order. Those guys just wrote down their eyewitness account in order. Jesus did this, he did this, then he went here, then he talked to this person and all of that. John's account is totally different. John said at the end of his life, here are 7 things that Jesus did that I think are fascinating, and they're miracles that happened, but he did them on purpose. And he wanted to tell us about it. So we've been marching through these 7 signs. So if you have your Bible, turn to John chapter 11. That's what scripture we're going to be in today, in looking at the 6th sign that Jesus did in his earthly ministry. And John walks us through why he did it and why it's important. So it's the story of Lazarus. Now, if you've been with us for a while, you know we talked about Lazarus just a few weeks ago in the month of July. And we talked about how Jesus is the resurrection and the life, and a different kind of point of view of this story. Today we're going to look at it from a different person's point of view, from this lady named Martha, from her point of view, and kind of what she was feeling in this story of Lazarus. Now, we don't have time to dive into the whole story, so if you're not familiar with the story at all, I forgot what the title of the message was, but you can look back online and you can see the one where we talked about the whole message. But here's a spoiler alert. Lazarus dies and Jesus resurrects him. Okay? So that's the spoiler. If you've never heard the story, sorry I ruined it for you, but that's how this whole story works. But we're going to talk about the front part of that story and why it was incredibly significant for us. So Jesus is about a day's walk from Bethany. So he's in the general vicinity, but Bethany, where our story takes place, Jesus is about a day's walk from it. So here's the way the story starts off. We're going to start in John chapter 11 in verse 1. If you're here and you don't have a Bible, there should be a Bible underneath the seats, or if you're watching online, you can download some. YouVersion is the app I love. It's got several different translations and reading guides and stuff. It's great to have on your phone or your tablet. But John chapter 11, starting in verse 1. John says, "Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha." Now, we're going to skip verse 2. We'll come back to that in just a minute. Verse 3 says, "So the sisters sent to him talking about Jesus, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. Jesus then responds, but when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. So here's the story, and Jesus' response to it is a little bit different. So Mary and Martha have a brother. His name is Lazarus. And we know that Jesus loved all of them, good friends with them. A little background, we know that Jesus in his ministry went to Mary and Martha's house. Martha cooked for Jesus, and they had some times together in the living room, so they were a close-knit kind of family. Jesus had frequented there quite a bit. I like to think that Martha made these little chocolate chip cookie cake things that Jesus loved, and every time he was there, he ate them. And then Mary would worship Jesus. It was kind of this cool thing. So these are close friends. So Martha, in our story, sends Jesus a text message and basically says, Jesus, Lazarus, the one whom you love, your good friend, is ill. Like, I want you to do something about it. Your friend is ill. When Jesus gets the message, he says something really crazy, that this illness doesn't end in death, but it's for the glory of God. We learned a few weeks ago, Jesus opens up a whole new category of illness or tragedy or persecution or troubles in life for the glory of God, which is a totally different story. This had not happened yet in Jesus' ministry. And so he opened it up and begins to talk about it. Verse 5 says, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister Lazarus. So you're kind of getting the point. John wants us to know these are close friends. He loved them. And Jesus loved them, Martha and Mary and Lazarus. At this point of the story, everything's normal. We haven't talked about anything that's weird until we get to verse 6. And then when we get to verse 6, it gets crazy because of something that John says in chapter 6 or in verse 6. He says, so when he had heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place that he was. So that should make you scratch your head and go, what? So, okay, let's go back to grammar school. For some of you, it was a long time ago. Some of you slept in grammar school, so you're not going to remember this. But the word so is usually used as a pronoun or as an adverb. That's the most common uses of the word so. But there's also times where the word so can be used as a conjunction. Here's what that means in case you forgot. But most of you already know this, but in case you forgot. It joins two clauses together to make a sentence. So it's something that happened before, because this happened, so then, or it's kind of like a way of saying therefore, because this happened, now this happened. So putting that together, we read our verse that says, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, and because he loved them, he stayed 2 days longer in the place that he was. That doesn't make any sense. Because he loved them, he did not go right away. He stayed more time where he was on purpose. Could have done something, but he didn't. And the Bible says he didn't do it because he had a point, and he had literally a purpose for doing that. So it's as though Jesus has a phone, an iPhone, probably. I don't think Jesus was an Android guy. He's probably an iPhone. He seems like an iPhone guy. And he gets it. Martha says, hey, Jesus, Lazarus sick. Jesus looks at it and reads it and puts it in his robe pocket. I don't know where he would have put it, but puts it in his robe pocket and doesn't respond. And so Martha looks at her text message and she's like, well, Mary said, did Jesus get your text? He's like, yeah, he got it. He read it. And then so what happened? Nothing happened. 2 days went by and nothing happened. Jesus, that's kind of the title of the message. Jesus, in essence, left her on red. I heard what you said, and we're going to find out later in the story that Jesus knew. The messengers had come back and said, yeah, we told him, and he said he was going to stay 2 days longer. He said something about it not ending in death, but we know by this time Lazarus has already died. And so this was a tragedy for Martha and for Mary. Everything is beginning to come unraveled. For us, it's very, very common because we pray for things, and then when God doesn't answer it, it shakes our faith. It messes us up. And then we become incredibly discouraged. Okay, so we're going to talk about something that's kind of personal that you've thought, but you probably haven't said out loud. So part of my job as a pastor is to say the things that you probably wouldn't say out loud, but you've thought about. And here's what it is. Most of us have gone through something in our life where things have kind of fallen apart, and so we came to faith in Christ. Most of us in this room, if not, I would argue to say all of us, there may be one or two, but all of us in this room, if you're a believer in Jesus, you came to faith in Christ because of something you could get out of it, right? Not necessarily because of who Jesus is and because of his glory and because he's creator, you wanted to worship God. You came to faith because your circumstances, you thought that faith was a way to control your circumstances. That's very common. So if you're a child when you came to faith, you came to faith in Christ because you didn't want to go to hell. I remember specifically, this is your pastor talking here, but I remember specifically in kids' church, the teacher was like, if you believe in Jesus, you go to heaven. And boys and girls, let me tell you about heaven. It's like glassy seas and streets of gold and all the candy you can eat. And it's the greatest place in the world. But then if you don't believe in Jesus, there's this place called hell. And boys and girls, have you ever burned your hand on a stove? It's that same feeling forever and ever. And you burn your hand and it's horrible and you can never get away from it. It's like being on fire for the rest of your life. Okay, boys and girls, raise your hand if you want to go to heaven. And I'm like, got it. I mean, is this a question? Well, there's always the one kid in the back who's like, I don't know. I'm kind of weighing the two options, see what I think. No, of course not. We did it because of something we could get. Or if you were older in life, your marriage is falling apart, your job was falling apart, the addiction had taken hold, things were totally falling apart in your life, and you thought that faith was a way to control the outcome in your life. And so you came to faith in Christ. Now listen, none of those things, and I'm putting myself in that boat, none of those things are wrong. I would argue, I don't care why you started going to church. I don't care what got you here as long as it was legal, ethical, and moral. I don't care why you got here. The hope is that you come and you hear the gospel of Jesus Christ while you are here, and then that changes your life. You ever thought about why we do Easter egg hunts and sports camp and all that? It's not because we're like in cahoots with a dentist in town and we want to give these kids all this candy so they get cavities and the dentist make money, gives us a cut. That's actually not a bad idea that I think of it. But that's not why. It's because we want them to have a good encounter with the church so that when life starts falling apart, they would hope the same as we do, that faith would be able to control the outcome, and then we get a chance to tell them about Jesus Christ and what he did. And then they grow through that. And most of you have grown outside of that. And so now it's not really controlling your circumstances, but that's why you started coming to church in the first place. That's why you got involved with Jesus. The problem is, what happens when Jesus doesn't show up the way you think he should? What happens when your circumstances don't change? Or what happens when your circumstances get worse? You came to faith in Christ and you believed it and you were taught it and you made a decision to follow Jesus, and then your life was here and now it's just spiraling out of control and things are worse. Because faith is never meant to control your circumstances. Faith in Jesus Christ is we believe because of who he is, not what he does. And that's where the strength of faith comes. We would all say, well, God is my provider, right? And you would say that. So if we're in like a Bible study, life group at someone's house, like raise your hand if God's your provider, and you'd raise your hand, God's my provider. But then in the back of your mind, you're thinking, but he ain't paying my rent, right? I mean, I got any money to pay the rent, so yes, he's my provider, but he's not paying the bills. There's no magical money that's appearing in my account because we think that God is going to do something with our circumstances, but for whatever reason, he's not. And for whatever reason, he doesn't do it. Now, here's where real faith comes into play. If you're willing, and you can write this down, but if you're willing to have faith, are you willing to have faith and praise God even when he's silent? That's where it gets tough. That God is working in this person's life and everything's going great. God's working in this person's life and everything's going fabulous. But my life is spiraling out of control. But yet I still praise God even though it seems like he's silent. Even though it seems like God leaves me on red, I'll still praise God. I remember I was at a state meeting, 138 churches from across the state. Once a year get together, have a little training thing. We're doing a worship session. The group from First Baptist Orlando was there, and there was a lady sitting on about the third row, and she had told me some things that were going on in her life, and it was bad. I mean, on the level of bad, it was at the top, and things were just falling apart in every different aspect. And she's sitting there praising God. Tears are flowing. She's caught up in this song. She's praising and worshiping God. And I remember looking at her from the side thinking, that's faith. Even though her life is falling apart, she's still praising God. True faith is learning to praise God even when he's silent. And I'll say it because you thought it and you maybe don't want to say it out loud. That's the hardest thing you'll ever do. But once you do it, it changes everything. It changes your whole entire outcome. What Jesus is doing, and the reason why he stayed 2 days later, is he's manufacturing a sign that you and I are going to use, that you and I are going to learn from 2,000 some odd years later. It's interesting, the next verses, we're going to skip around a lot. Verses 7 through 13, he has an argument with his disciples, who I love these guys. They're just kind of a truckload of crazy guys, and they don't understand anything that Jesus says, and they're trying to decide, do we go back to Bethany? Do we not? What do we do? And Jesus just said it's not going to end in death, and he's confusing them. They're having this talk, and so Jesus finally says in verse 14, guys, listen up. Lazarus is dead. He died. The man ain't breathing. It's over. To which I know a couple of them probably scratched their head and said, you just said a minute ago, not that verse. You said a minute ago that it's not going to end in death. You just told us that, this sickness is not going to end in death, but for the glory of God, the Son of God may be glorified to it. But now you're just telling us that Lazarus has died. So then they go to make this journey to Bethany. And then listen to what Jesus says that is crazy. If you're reading it, you have to stop and scratch your head. Verse 15, Lazarus has died, and for your sake, I'm glad that I was not there so that you may believe. But let us go to him. You know what I think he did? I think he's talking to the 12 guys, and they're not really understanding. I think he kind of steps out of that moment and would look at this room and those watching online and those in the first service and say, there's going to be a group of people in Laurel, Montana in 2020 that I'm glad I wasn't there for Lazarus, because they're going to understand what I mean, and they're going to be able to grab value on this 2,000 years later. So I'm glad I wasn't there for them. For any husband or wife that's had a spouse run out on them and leave the family, I'm glad I was not there. For anyone who's caught up in a relationship and the abuse just keeps going on, I'm glad I wasn't there for their sake. For anyone that's prayed for the lost soul of a family member, I'm glad I was not there so that they could see the glory of God. For anyone that has depression and anxiety and it's just overcoming them, I'm glad that I was not there so that you may believe. I think he's talking to us. And then he says, so let's go. Let's head to Bethany. As they begin to go, Mary and Martha are there. This is one of the best conversations in the Bible, in my opinion. Mary and Martha keep in mind, just make it a little confusing. Let me try to do the best I can. John wrote this many, many years later. He was an old man. Some people say that he dictated the words and someone else wrote it because he was so old. So he's remembering back 30, 40, 50 years back what happened. In verse 2, John decides to tell us something that doesn't happen until chapter 12 in the Bible. So we're in John chapter 11. Chapter 12, there's a really cool story where Martha's cooking those little chocolate chip cookie cakes that Jesus loves, and then Mary is worshiping Jesus, and then she uses her perfume to clean his feet, and it was just this great worship moment. John wants to remind us of that. So back to verse 2, the verse we skipped. John said, "It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair. It was her whose brother Lazarus was ill." So John's like, hey, remember this. Mary and Martha don't know it yet because it hasn't happened. But it was these two that were worshiping God in chapter 12. But in chapter 11, literally, and I don't mean this bad, but in chapter 11, all hell was breaking loose in their life. Everything was falling apart. Something happened between all hell breaking loose and them worshiping Jesus in chapter 12. And John reminds us, I think John also reminds us to say, it's very, very important to know that Jesus loved these people. They were close friends. And Jesus, for whatever reason, is late. I love this song. I've recently, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but I have a playlist on my phone. Like my favorite songs. When I hear one, I Shazam it, I think is the word, and I record it so I can listen to it on my phone. Remember when we used to make mixtapes of your favorite songs? Oh man, I love mixtapes. If you were born after 1990, forget I said that because you're like, what? What's a mixtape? I got some mixtapes. But I have this song called Yes, I Will. I love the song. But it says God's never late or something like that. And when I heard that, I thought, nah, that's not really true. Still love the song, but God sometimes is late. In this instance, Jesus is late. I heard a pastor say, and I love the way he said it. He said, Jesus wasn't fashionably late. Jesus was functionally late. He was late, but it was for a reason. And we're getting ready to find out what that reason is. So as they're going on, as things are beginning to happen, jump down to verse 20. We're going to move ahead through some of this. And he said, so when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. This is getting good. So Jesus is coming to Bethany to go to Mary and Martha's house. He's been there before. He's had meals with them. This is very frequent. Every other time, he would walk in, he would knock on the door. Martha would be like, hey, Jesus, come on in. Mary would be like, hey, Jesus, how are you? Lazarus is in the other room. He's like, hey, Lazarus, did you see the chariot game on ESPN? Oh, and the black horse right at the end. It was really cool, and they'd have these conversations. Not this time. This time, everything changed. You know what I think happened is, Jesus, because he had an iPhone, and Martha had an iPhone, when Martha texted Jesus and Jesus left her on red, I think Martha also had Jesus on her Life 360 app and found out that he was coming, that he was close. Side note, if you're a parent and you don't have Life 360 on your phone, you have to get it. Go download it and put it on all of your kids' phones. Don't read the reviews because all of the teenagers have banded together and they have left the funniest reviews on Life 360. They're like, it's horrible, it's the worst thing. Right, because they don't want you tracking you. It's a phone app that tracks everywhere you go. Kids, if you don't think you need it, I'm a 48-year-old grown man and my mama can track everywhere I go. Don't turn off your location settings because you're going to get a phone call. Why are your location settings off, right? Everyone, my sister can track everyone can track where I go, so you need it, side note. But I think Martha sees it on her phone. She's like, Jesus is getting close. And she bolts out the door, does not wait for Jesus to get to the house. Evidently, this was kind of far away. It wasn't like the driveway. Martha ran out to meet him. When she ran out to meet Jesus, she wasn't going to meet Jesus to have a little church. She was ticked off. She was as mad as an old wet hen. This was not going to be church. It's getting ready to happen because she is going to let Jesus have it. It's been 2 days. I sent you a text message. You left me on red. Do you want to know what happened during those 2 days? He died. He's dead. And you got the message. You knew about it. The messenger said they told you, and so you decided to stay another 2 days anyway? Jesus, let me ask you, what is wrong with you? The verse says it like this. Martha looks at him and says, Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died. What that means is, Jesus, this is your fault. You're the one that caused this. If you could have, I saw you heal a blind guy. We talked about that 3 weeks ago. I saw you heal a lame guy that couldn't walk. I saw you do all of these things. I know you can heal people, but you didn't come. You left me on red, and because of that, Lazarus has died. Your fault. Do you know what, Jesus? Do you remember the Sadducee that came? We talked about this, I think, 2 weeks ago, that said his son was dying, and you were like, just go home in faith, your son will be well. You didn't even have to go to the kid's house to heal him. You just did it like over the internet or something. I don't know how you did it, Jesus, but you healed him, and the kid lived, and you didn't even have to go there. Why couldn't you do that? Why couldn't you just do that thing and heal Lazarus? You didn't, and he died. Jesus, you have been in my house. We have sat together. You love those little chocolate chip cookie things I make for you. You do all these things. You've been here. You've slept here. We're like family to you. And I ask one thing for you to heal my brother, and you didn't. Jesus, you're there when I cooked. But you're not there when I'm crying. This is literally, and Martha then begins to say, my faith in you was rock solid, but at this point, I don't know what to do. Because if you would have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Now, we've prayed prayers like that, haven't we? And here again, it's not the type of prayer you pray in Bible study, or you don't pray this before the meal when you're out with your church group. You don't pray, God, if you would have been there to stop my dad from abusing me, then my life would have been different. God, if you would have been there so mom would not drink as much, then everything would have changed. God, if you would have been there for stopping me from going on this date with this guy, then I wouldn't be in this situation that I am. God, if you would have been there to help me make this decision, God, if you would have been there, if you would have done that, if you would have stopped that car, if you would have done this thing, if you would have just showed up, everything would have been different, but you didn't. It's your fault. And here's what makes it worse. Here again, you would never say this, but I've seen you do it in other people's life. Goodness gracious, guy's like almost dead with cancer, and all of a sudden, next day, he's out playing football somewhere. You decided to heal him, but in my family, my loved one died, and you could have done something about it, but you chose not to. Do you not care? Are you not listening? Is this even real? You know what? I'm out. See, this is the story of everyone's faith that goes through something like this. And the worse the tragedy, the worse the outcome. And I think Jesus obviously knew this. So he's saying what's going to happen is going to happen for a reason. I'm getting ready to do something that people for thousands of generations will be able to have in their pocket as a way to make their faith stronger, as a way to begin to grow. Now, in this conversation, remember, Jesus is not in the house. He's out by the gate getting chewed out by Martha. And then some part of Martha clicks, and I think, I don't know this is part of my version of the Bible if I were to write one, is that she probably felt like she had chewed him out a little bit too much. So she snaps out of it for a second in verse 21 and says, but even now I know that whatever you ask from God, he will give you. So it's like Martha saying, okay, I know that anything you ask of God, he'll give you. Maybe she thought she was a little too hard and heavy on him. I don't know, but she's an emotional wreck. This has only been 2 days since this guy's been dead. Well, actually 4 days. So we know that this is bad. So she's probably not in the best place. Then Jesus, as he normally does, says something that might be a little bit confusing. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. To which Martha thought, okay, great, I get this. I remember the teachings before about the resurrection and how everything's going to be great. We all get to heaven. There's going to be glassy seas, the streets of gold, all the candy you can eat, all this great stuff. I get it. You know what, Jesus? I don't need a sermon right now. Save your preaching for another time. I don't need a sermon. I need you to tell me why you left me on red and why you didn't show up. This is not the time for an object lesson. We know that because in verse 24, Martha said to him, I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. I get that. I've heard the teachings time and time again. I know, but here's the deal, Jesus. If you would have been here, there wouldn't have been a last day. We could have avoided this last day altogether, but for whatever reason, you were not here. And then Jesus does something and totally turns the tables on what's happening because Jesus is doing this for a point, remember? Remember the conjunction that Jesus is literally saying, because I love them, I'm going to stay 2 extra days. I'm doing this for a reason, and here's the reason. You can write this down in your note. Proof of God's love is not found in who he is, but what he does. Proof of God's love is found in literally who he is as a person, not what he does for us. Most of you would believe that, but most of us, including myself, haven't internalized it because we think if God loves us, then he will do things for us, right? It's the way we do it with each other. If I want to show my love to you, I do things for you. If you want to show your love for me, you do things for me. So we think that relates to how God is. But God's love is found in who he is. Jesus is getting ready to make a point that it has nothing to do with what I do for you. What you need to learn in this situation is who I am. But you didn't show up. I know. It's who I am, not what I do. But if you would have been here, you wouldn't have died. I know. Listen to how he says it in the next verse, verse 25. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. He goes on to verse 26. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. This was probably confusing for Martha. We understand it because I've given you the spoiler. You know what's getting ready to happen to Lazarus. Martha doesn't. At this point, Lazarus is still dead. And Martha's not expecting anything different. Martha's not expecting any miracle to happen. She just knows that she's angry because Jesus wasn't there. And then when he says that to her, he says something that's amazing, the last part of the verse. I think he may have grabbed her face or something and said, hey, Martha, do you believe this? And to which she would have said, yeah, of course. He said, no. Listen, of all the times you've walked with me and all the times you've seen me do things and the stories you've heard me tell, I have said time and time again that I am the resurrection and the life. If you believe in me, you're not going to die, but you're going to have life. And this life is going to be absolutely amazing. And anyone that believes will never die. Martha, do you believe this? To which Martha may have said, well, yeah, but Lazarus is dead. So maybe not. Maybe I do believe this, but I don't know how I'm feeling about it right now. I want to believe it. Have you ever been there? I want to believe this, but in my life, I don't see it playing out like that. Now, here's the other thing about this, which I think is interesting. Why is Jesus still talking to Martha? Why is he wasting why did Jesus go to Bethany? Went to Bethany to raise Lazarus, right? Why is he still wasting his time talking to Martha? Why didn't Martha meet him at the gate and Jesus is like, Martha, I don't got time for it. I got to go raise Lazarus and go get the job done. Here's why. Because I believe Martha was not just a player in this story. She was one of the points of the story. That Jesus is there. Jesus is present through the pain of disappointment. I wonder how long Jesus would have stayed with Martha at the gate. Maybe as long as she wanted. Maybe as long as she needed. Remember, Jesus is sitting here taking all of this, knowing what he's getting ready to do. But he did it because he cares for people. He cares for people. Jesus will stay with you through your questions as long as you need him to. Next couple of verses. She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world." And when she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying to her in private, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And she went, and when she heard it, she rose quickly to come and meet him. So what's happening in this is Jesus is beginning to do something. Martha's there talking to Jesus, chewing him out. And then she says, "Yes, I believe who you say you are. I believe all this stuff." And then, for whatever reason, Jesus says, "Go get Mary." Because Mary's still sitting in the house. Why is Mary sitting in the house? Because Mary is as mad as she can be at Jesus too. I'm not going out there to talk to him. He blew it. This is his fault. If he would have been here, things would have been much different. For whatever reason, Jesus never showed up. Verse 30, now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. I think John wanted us to keep that in mind, as if to say nothing's happened. He's still getting chewed out by these two. The next couple of verses are interesting. We're going to skip them for time's sake. But Mary comes out and has the same conversation with Jesus that Martha had, almost word for word. She comes out, "If you would have been here, my brother wouldn't have died." Why were those two the same, do you think? Because these two chicks have been sitting inside this house for 4 days talking about it. If he would have been here, if he'd have been here. Can you imagine? Two chicks. Can I call them chicks? Is that okay? Can you imagine? Mary goes in to check on Jesus, and his fever's getting worse, hasn't eaten, or check on Lazarus, Fever's getting worse, hadn't eaten, not drinking. She goes back out to Martha, and she's like, "Martha, did Jesus text you back?" It's like, "No, nothing." Next day rolls around, he's getting worse, he's not responsive anymore. "Did Jesus text you back? Have you heard anything?" "No, nothing." Later that evening, breathing gets shallow and his heart rate starts to stop and things are really falling apart. And he's like, "Please tell me Jesus has said something. Is anything text you back?" "No." Next morning, they pull the sheet over Lazarus. He's dead. And then Mary would say, "Martha, did Jesus text you back?" And Martha would say, "I don't know. Does it matter? If he would have been here, we wouldn't be in this situation." We know that those two for the next 2 days had that conversation because that's the first thing that comes out of Mary's mouth when she gets to Jesus. At some point in this conversation, it's time to do what Jesus came to do. Verse 34, and he said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." So now it's time to get down to business. So Jesus basically said, "Where's he at? Where'd you put him? Take me to him. Take me to that place. Take me to the place where Lazarus is. In essence, to the deepest need that you have, the one that we're out here talking about. Let's get down to business." You realize we've spent this entire part of this chapter dealing with two women talking to Jesus, chewing out Jesus for something that had happened, and there hadn't been any miracle that has taken place yet. Because here's why. I believe that God demonstrates his empathy before he demonstrates his authority. That God will always show you his love and his empathy to you as a person before he ever demonstrates his authority over your life. Is that not true about the resurrection and the crucifixion? He showed you his love on a cross by giving his life for you, but before he ever showed you the power that he has over death to rise again. Jesus always shows his empathy before he demonstrates his authority. So they're standing out inside the tomb where Lazarus is, and then this famous verse, which you're into. If you want to memorize scripture, start with this one, and you can call mom and say, hey, memorized the whole verse. The entire verse is that Jesus wept. Why? You have to ask the question why. Because if you know the end of the story, he's going to bring Lazarus back from the dead, so he's not weeping because Lazarus is dead. He's weeping because of the pain that it caused Mary and Martha. And you almost wonder if he said, Mary, Martha, you're not going to understand this, but 2,000 years from now, there's going to be a group of people that need this, and I know it's caused you pain, and I know it's caused you heartache, but I want you to hear this, that I care for you, and I love you. And he was so much caught up in the emotion that Jesus is standing out in front of this tomb in tears. Just before this, a group was already talking, saying, well, how come he healed the blind guy, and he loved this one, didn't even know the blind guy, why didn't he do the same thing? And Jesus is totally caught up in this emotion. Jesus begins to weep. Don't miss the magnitude of this moment. Then it goes on, verse 38. Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. And then Jesus said what no one was expecting him to say. Jesus said, take away the stone. So they're all standing out there. This is the amazing part of Scripture. They're all standing out there, and then Jesus tells some of the guys, take away the stone. Now, here's what you need to know about Jewish burials. Without the help of medical technology, they didn't know when a person had truly died. So there would be some times where someone would look as though they have died in a coma or have passed out, and then would come back to life. After the sunset on the third day, they were considered not only physically dead, but spiritually dead, that the spirit had left them. The thought was after they had gone without food and water for that many days, they're not coming back. So it had been 4 days. Jesus was there. Lazarus was dead. His spirit was gone. And so Jesus says, I want you to take away the stone. Why did Jesus say this? Couldn't he have done it? He's getting ready to bring someone back to life. He could have moved the stone, but he didn't. Can you imagine the faith that it took for a guy to walk up, or maybe several guys, to walk up to the stone and be like, are you sure about this? You want us to move this stone? We're going to see Martha's comment in a minute. But you really want us to take this stone away? There's a dead person inside. And so Jesus asked them to do that because of faith. Did they have the faith to take away the stone? Here's an easier way to word it. Once we do all that we can do, then God will do what only he can do. I've had some debates with other pastors about this. I remember a while ago, a guy was like, no, that's not true. God doesn't need us to do anything. And you're right. God doesn't need us to do anything. But every single example in Scripture shows an act of faith on our part followed by a miracle on God's part. God doesn't show up, kick the door open, and fix things. God uses people to accomplish his work. We begin to see, is there any example in Scripture where God didn't use people? Yeah, creation. That would be one, right? You could argue the resurrection, although it took people to crucify Jesus. So one of the truths throughout Scripture is that once we do all that we can do, then God will do what only he can do. It's not that he doesn't have the power. God doesn't need us to, but God will ask you to take a step of faith before he shows up. He has done that time and time again through Scripture, which means, I want my marriage to be better. Okay, fine. You're going to have to put some work in to make it that way. Want to overcome this addiction? Okay, fine. You're going to have to spend some time hurting because of it to fix it. I want to have more money in my account and be able to live a little bit more free. Okay, fine. You're going to have to stop spending. There's going to be things that you're going to have to do, a step of faith before God will do what only he can do. Listen to Martha's response. Martha, the sister of the dead man, so John reminds us, don't forget he's a dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he's been dead 4 days. By this time, there will be an odor. This is my favorite passage in the King James Version because it says, Lord, he stinketh. I don't know where King James came up with that, but Lord, he stinketh. There's going to be an odor because this guy's been dead 4 days. Are you sure you want me to remove the stone? And then I think Jesus looked at her and maybe grabbed her face again and said this amazing verse. Jesus said to her, Martha, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? To which Martha would say, yeah, but it doesn't make sense. We're going to move the stone. And did he start decaying? I don't know when bodies start decaying, but it's been 4 days. We're in the Middle Eastern desert here, Jesus. This is probably not the best thing. And Jesus said, it's not about that, Martha. I said that if you believed, you would see the glory of God. Do you not believe that? Do you believe that that's what's going to happen? Do you believe that if you take a step of faith, then I will show up? See, for us, that's where the tipping point is. Because we want to take a step of faith, but we don't see God doing anything. And so you know what? We never take the step of faith to allow God to work. Can you imagine for just a minute? What if they wouldn't have moved the stone? What if Martha would have said, no, I don't want everyone to see Lazarus like that. We're not going to move the stone. I don't know. Would Jesus have walked away? I don't know. Maybe for the illustration, he wouldn't have, but we're not sure. But without that step of faith, they would have never seen the glory of God. Because you know what they were expecting? They were expecting dead people to do what dead people do. You want to know what dead people do? They stay dead. That's what dead people do. You need to remember that next week when we talk about the resurrection. That's what people were expecting. They're expecting Lazarus to stay dead. We're not going to move the stone. He's going to stink by now. But Jesus knew the glory of God would be shown through what he's going to do. To end the story, I kind of feel bad for the first service because I didn't even tell them this part. Jesus says a little prayer, which is a prayer that basically says, God, the only reason I'm praying is so that they can hear me pray to you because we already know what we're going to do. And then he tells Lazarus to come out, and a dead man who's now come to life walks out, still wrapped up in grave clothes, and everyone is shocked. So much so that he has to look at him and say, well, go take the grave clothes off of him. Help the guy out a little bit. Because they were so shocked at what had happened. And Jesus was saying the whole time, if you believe, you're going to see the glory of God. What does that mean for us? Don't stop your process of believing. Regardless of what Jesus does in your life or doesn't do in your life, do not be one of those who your faith comes unraveled because God doesn't fix the circumstances that you think he should. Don't walk away from faith because you're at that point where you feel like God didn't answer your prayers. Don't be a statistic. You could be moments away from a miracle. You could be that close from the glory of God showing up in your life, but you've had it. You're done. I prayed about this. You did it in this person's life. You did it in that person's life. But for whatever reason, Jesus, you haven't responded to me. You haven't fixed a problem in my life, so I am out. I wonder how many people will end up in heaven and God will say, you were so close. You were at that point where I was going to show up, where a miracle was going to happen. I was going to step in on your behalf. Why? Because you kept believing. That's what faith is. Faith is believing even when it seems like God is silent. So are you willing to do that? I want you to bow your head and close your eyes with me for just a minute. Because I guarantee that there's people here today where you've been praying about something for a really long time. And for whatever reason, God hasn't answered. God's left you on red, he hadn't responded, and you're frustrated by it. For some of you, your faith hasn't gone any further because you're mad about it. Because if he was God, he would. I don't think it's a question of belief. If we believe what God's word says, he's raised the dead, he split the sea in two, he created the world, he created all that's in it. It's not that God can or can't, but why won't he? I think you can look at the sign that John tells us as a way of Jesus saying, you just keep believing. How many times? 3 different times he asked Martha, do you believe that? This is not about what I'm doing. This is about whether you believe that Jesus is the Christ, the one sent by God. So, this morning, would you be willing to say, God, even if you don't answer this thing that I've been praying about, I'm going to keep believing. My prayer for you as a friend is that God will show up right away. But if he doesn't, even the journey of God not answering your prayer can strengthen your faith. So take just a minute in the quietness of this time. Maybe have a confession with God. Maybe do like Martha. God can handle our anger. God can handle our misunderstanding. God can handle our frustration, and tell God, I'm frustrated by this, but I'm willing to keep believing. I'm willing to stay in this until I see a miracle. Take just a minute. Do some personal one-on-one business with God, and then I'll close this here in just a minute. Dear Heavenly Father, as your people are praying this morning, we know that possibly everyone in this room, possibly everyone watching this video has dealt with this. God, you know in my life I have. You know the frustration when it seems like you're not answering, you're not moving, you're not doing it. God, I take personally so much faith from you sharing this story. God, we know the pain that it caused them, but God, we know that literally you are concerned with us as people. To see you weeping outside of a tomb because of the pain it caused your people gives us strength. God, for myself, for those here, for those watching, that you would be with us through the journey, even if you're not going to do anything yet. God, if you like this story, if you're waiting on purpose, then just like Jesus was with Martha, God, be present with us. Allow us to let our emotions be made known to you. Allow us to confess those things that trouble us. And God, I'm not going to sit here for a second and pray that you don't answer, because that's why we're praying. We want you to do something. But if you choose not to, let our faith stay strong. Let us keep on believing. For it's in Jesus' heavenly and precious name we pray. Amen.